I know I said I wouldn't be doing another Project L video anytime soon, because there's not a lot of information to talk about. Riot Games is going dark, so they won't be sharing any new information with us, and nothing's changed. There's nothing new to talk about. But it had recently occurred to me that I hadn't actually talked about the universal mechanics of said game, so let's do that. Also, I'm just on a pretty big League of Legends high right now. Worlds 2019 was amazing to watch from week to week. The True Damage song was super hype. The finals between G2 and FPX, while one-sided, was really enjoyable for me, so I just want to talk about the League of Legends fighting game because of all of that, and of course fighting games are one of my true passions. Just a quick bit of history for those out of the loop, I'm going to be mentioning a game called Rising Thunder throughout this video. Rising Thunder was the previous project that Radiant Entertainment was working on before they were acquired by Riot Games. Some of the developers, in fact I believe a majority of the developers that were working on Rising Thunder are now working on the Riot fighting game, and I'm sure they have new employees in there, but the general team is that same team who made Rising Thunder. Well, they never finished Rising Thunder, but they were making Rising Thunder. So looking at Rising Thunder might give us an idea of how the Riot fighting game is going to play, or at the very least it will give us a window into the developer's mind. I want to discuss some of the more interesting moves I've noticed through the little bits of gameplay we have here and there. Both Jinx and Darius perform this same type of uppercut move that leaves the enemy in a very similar position. I suspect that this will be a universal launcher that every character will have access to. Of course, I could be wrong about this, but just based on the two animations, they look incredibly similar, so my assumption is that this is in fact a universal mechanic. I also want to discuss the 4 different types of glowing effects that we've seen in the game. I'm assuming that these are universal mechanics that have very specific properties. For example, this white transparent effect that happens on Katarina as she flips out of the combo. This happens because the juggle limit has been hit, so she can't be juggled anymore. This yellow effect happens as Katarina activates her teleport. I'm assuming this is because she uses a bar of meter on the teleport, enhancing the move from whatever the default version is. We never see the default version, but I'm assuming this is an enhanced version of another move, and that's consuming a bar of her meter, which is why she's glowing yellow. There's going to be a little bit more on that later, but let's move on with these glowing effects. There's this one reddish effect that happens to Darius. I think this is because he got counter hit. You can see Darius kind of winding up his attack, and as he gets hit, the camera pans quickly and there's this red effect. Again, I think this is a counter hit. And lastly, there is this blue effect. Now, it's possible this is a Katarina specific thing, but I currently believe it to be a universal parry mechanic. I'm not sure how you're going to trigger it, but it is fairly similar to something we saw in Rising Thunder, and it has this very specific blue glow. It is possible this isn't a universal mechanic and that anybody who happens to have a parry move will have this blue effect. Either way, I'm pretty sure blue just means parry. Alright, that's all of the moves and universal stuff that we could point out. Now we can get into the HUD. And here's where it starts to get very complicated, and I think to simplify it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through all of the HUD elements we can see. I'm going to talk about what we know for sure, and then we're going to go back over the same information, and then I'm going to speculate a little bit, and I'll tell you what I think is going on. We can see that the match timer is going to be 90 seconds, or a minute and a half. We can see 2 empty spaces above each health bar. These are likely round stocks, because that's just the position they happen to be in every fighting game. Then you have these 2 empty bars below each player's health bar. Initially, I thought this might be another resource, but as we can see in an entirely different clip, these are simply just nameplates. Before we continue, I want to point out that everything I've mentioned so far happens to line up with Rising Thunder perfectly, including the combo counter, which also has the same color scheme and even a juggle limit. I mention that because what I'm about to bring up is our first deviation from what Rising Thunder was. In Rising Thunder, there are no motion inputs. You simply press a special button for one of each of your 3 special moves. Each of those special moves have a cooldown. This limits the frequency at which you can use those moves. However, in Project L, I don't think that cooldowns are returning. In the position where we had those 3 moves for cooldowns at the bottom left and bottom right, we now have 4 different blocks separated from each other, as opposed to 3 which we had in Rising Thunder. In the Jinx clip, we can see that both players have all 4 bars fully loaded up and they're yellow. But in this clip with Katarina versus Darius, we can see that Darius has 3 bars available and Katarina only has 1. Katarina uses her teleport in this clip and it consumes one of those bars. This appears to be quite different to the cooldown system, but more theories on that a little later. In the same clip, we can see icons for each character in their respective corners. This could be something special special, but again, more on that later. There is one final bar underneath each player's health bar, and they seem almost connected. This is where it starts to get very difficult, but now we're going to have to jump into more speculation territory because we don't know anything specific about the things we're going to talk about moving forward. I have a very specific theory about how all of this is playing out. Now, this theory is that the Jinx clip, the player is in training mode, which explains a lot of the inconsistencies in this clip. We do actually have a couple reasons to believe that this is training mode. For example, in this clip, the nameplates don't have any names in them at all. Why? Well, you don't need to know who is who in training mode. Both players have all 4 bars of meter filled up, which would be consistent with training mode. And perhaps most importantly, the timer isn't going down at all. It's stuck at 90 seconds throughout the entirety of the clip. And of course, both players have 100% health, which is what you would want in training mode. Now, I'm not sure about this last one because we have no idea how this mechanic works, but it could also explain why neither player has that special icon at the bottom left and right hand corner, like in the Katarina clip. Now, I wanted to explain that theory about training mode because it sets up my next conclusion. Remember that bar we talked about? This one right here, the bar that meets in the center on both players. I think that this bar is going to be your ultimate technique or super, but I also think it works incredibly differently than in most fighting games. In fact, I don't even think that any fighting game has done this specific mechanic. The closest thing I could think of is Under Night, and it doesn't work at all like what I'm about to theorize. Now, we only have 2 clips of gameplay, but regardless of which clip you choose, the bar is always on one side of the player. It's never shared between the two. I think that this is one bar that both players are working to get onto their side. Even in the clip that I currently believe to be training mode, only Katarina has it on her side, which is strange because you would expect the bar to be maxed out because all of the bars are maxed out in training mode in most fighting games. And we can also see that the Katarina bar is actually filled up because it's flashing in glowing colors and everything. It's not like mostly filled up, it is 100% filled up. I suspect that this game is going to focus and center around this bar. I think it's going to be incredibly important to notice whose side this bar is on. Is it on my opponent's side? Does he have resources right now? Do I have resources? And it's also going to open up some specific plays. If I have my opponent trapped in the corner and I know that the bar is on my side, well, now I know I'm safe from a wake up super or something like that. I think the management of this bar is going to be incredibly important for the metagame of Project L. I also suspect that there's going to be a reason you would want to be at this halfway point, which would explain why they've separated it into 2 bars even though it's functionally 1. Perhaps at the halfway point you're going to have access to a combo breaker. We had a combo breaker in Rising Thunder, but there doesn't appear to be any HUD elements that suggest that's still available, unless that's what this half point is. Now, unfortunately, there's only one example of this bar moving. It happens in the Katarina clip where we see that parry mechanic we talked about earlier. Darius's side of the bar shrinks and it gets closer to the Katarina side, which suggests that Katarina is being rewarded for hitting that parry. Now, I don't know what other conditions are going to be required for controlling this bar, but it seems to make sense to me that things like counter hits would work in your favor. I think it's going to create for a really interesting metagame. I've also got theories about how the orange bars work at the bottom right and left hand corners. What if it's not a traditional meter system? We never see one of these bars filled up, we only see them on or off. We never see them in a state of halfway filled up. What if that means you're only able to enhance your special move once per round? Or what if it means there are no enhancements? What if you can only use a special move once per round? These are all incredibly interesting questions that could make for a very different fighting game than what the vast majority of us are used to. Oh, one side thing, it's not very important for gameplay, but I think it's worth pointing out, is that I believe this is a spectate option right here, already confirmed for the game. We can see a little party icon, and the party icon is set to 0, which would seem to suggest that there are 0 spectators right now. That's a really nice feature already added to the game, assuming that that is what that is. I can't think of anything else it would be, so I'm assuming it's a spectate button. That's another reason to believe that the Jinx clip is in fact training mode, because we don't see that party icon. Look at how much we were able to talk about Project L in this video with literally 9 seconds of gameplay footage. That's pretty crazy. Regardless, I hope you were able to enjoy the video. If you did, I'd really appreciate you leaving a like on it because videos like this take up a lot of time. Thank you so much for watching. My name has been Bilbzy, and I'll be sure to see you in the next video.